Good evening, friends. I hope wherever you find yourself tonight, the weather is kind and your spirits are light. Have you ever glanced at a stranger, let your judgment fly, only to realize later just how wrong you were? That burden is heavy, the weight of a mistake that can never be undone. Tonight's story centers on a moment just like that. A young, arrogant millionaire sees nothing but a crippled old soldier and his silver-coated dog, only someone to ridicule and dismiss. But within minutes, a locked safe reveals a secret worth $58 million, one that silences the young man's smug smile. As a fierce blizzard closes in and a midnight deadline looms, the banker discovers his entire future hinges on the forgiveness of the man he tried to discard. This is a tale honoring the quiet dignity of a loyal dog, the pride of youth, and a storm-driven journey that changes everything. So take a seat, get comfortable, and prepare to be moved. If these heartfelt stories resonate with you, subscribe and become part of our family. Now let's begin. The wind howling down from the Rocky Mountain peaks wasn't just wind. It was a wild, roaring force, alive and breathing. A white ghost tearing through Denver's streets, obliterating the skyline and turning the world into a swirling storm of gray and white. It was the kind of tempest that warned the wise to stay indoors, light their fires, and wait for calm to return. But Randall Cooper was no man to listen to caution. He was a man who kept his word. Standing at the corner of 17th Street, the wind lashed at his worn brown leather jacket that clung to his slender frame at 75 years old. Randall seemed less a man and more a rugged part of the landscape carved by the harsh elements made of grit and endurance. His face bore a labyrinth of deep lines and weathered scars, partly hidden beneath a thick gray beard catching snowflakes before they melted. Beneath his unzipped jacket was a heavy navy flannel shirt, buttoned askew at the collar worn over a faded gray tee that had weathered many years. He tightened his grip on the wooden crutch tucked under his right arm, rough and smooth from years of use. That simple crutch was not plastic like the sterile government-issued kind. It was one he'd carved himself long ago, a craft of necessity and pride. Years ago, plastic felt cold and fake, but this was a companion worn by sweat and friction a part of him. "Check the time, old man?" he muttered, fumbling with gloves worn thin at the fingertips as he pulled a battered wallet from his back pocket. Inside, hidden behind a few tattered single-dollar bills, was a small tear-off calendar, yellowed and fragile like a sacred relic. November 30th. Randall stared at the date, his eyes stinging from the biting cold. November 30th, 1971. An end and a new beginning all at once. Exactly 50 years had passed since the jungle, since the fire, since the promise made in the ashes. "We can't be late, Wallace," he whispered to the howling wind. A cold, wet nose nudged his left hand, the one free of the crutch. Randall looked down. There stood Blizzard, the towering German shepherd, still as stone amid the chaos of the raging storm. His coat, a striking silver sable blend of gray and silver, gave him the power to vanish into the winter whites if he wished. But today, Blizzard chose to be a steadfast, solid presence, 8 years old, his muzzle dusted with winter's gray matching the snow's own paintbrush. Yet in those sharp, intelligent eyes burned fierce focus, no trembling, no fear. The dog was unshakable. He never once complained about the biting cold beneath his paws or the ice cruelly clumping between his pads. Instead, he simply pressed his sturdy shoulder against Randall's left leg, not as a sign of affection, though their bond was unbreakable. This was a tactical move. Blizzard was steadying him. Randall's left leg was flesh and bone, but his right leg ended just below the knee, replaced by a prosthetic limb that chilled through the cold, sending phantom jolts of pain shooting up into his hip with every laborious step. The metal of the artificial limb acted as a frost conductor, numbing the remaining nerves with relentless cold. Blizzard felt this, instinctively sensing the shift in Randall's balance before Randall himself could. The dog pressed harder against the man's thigh, a living counterbalance absorbing the biting wind that threatened to knock the old soldier down. "Forward, Blizzard," Randall commanded, his gravelly voice nearly lost to the gale. The dog moved instantly, and together they forged ahead, their steps a synchronized rhythm honed through years. Step, crutch, drag. Step, crutch, drag. Every 10 yards, Blizzard paused, glancing back to ensure Randall's boot had found footing on the slick concrete, before moving onward. They were heading toward the tallest structure on the block, a towering fortress of steel and glass defiant against the storm. The sign above the entrance was blurred through the blizzard, but Randall knew it well. Sterling Heights. It was a bank, but not the kind where everyday folks went to cash checks or sift through pennies. This was an investment bank where money wasn't tangible currency, but an abstract concept, numbers flashing on screens that dictated the fate of companies, even nations. Randall felt small standing there, his stained denim nearly ghost white at the knees, and his worn boots, heavy, reliable work boots, repaired and resoled countless times. He didn't belong here. His heart belonged back at the cabin on the ridge where pine resin and wood smoke filled the air, not the scent of car exhaust or expensive cologne, but the letter burning in his pocket, pressing against his chest, urged him forward. "Let's get this over with," Randall muttered, pushing against the heavyweight revolving door. Though resistant, he leaned into it, and with Blizzard squeezing in beside him, they tumbled into the lobby where silence crashed down, a stark contrast to the storm's howl outside. The roar was replaced by a warm hum of high-end climate control and the soft murmur of business voices. The air smelled of polished marble and fresh lilies. Randall stomped his boots, shaking off melting snow that pooled silently on the flawless floor. The echo of his heavy boots and the steady thud of his wooden crutch resounded like a judge's hammer striking the bench. Heads turned. Men in suits more expensive than Randall's truck broke their conversations. Women in tailored dresses regarded him with a spectrum of reactions, ranging from curiosity to mild alarm. They studied his wild gray hair, the damp beard, the handmade crutch, and then the wolf-like creature at his side. Blizzard did not glance around, sniff the floor, or wag his tail at the strangers. He positioned himself at Randall's right side, acting as a shield between his handler and the open room ears, rotating like radar dishes. He sat perfectly still, chest broad and regal. "Sir," came a voice from the security desk, a man in an ill-fitting uniform, his tone courteous but guarded. Approaching them with a name tag that read Ben, he trudged forward every inch, exhausted, worn from standing guard through long, endless 12-hour shifts where nothing ever stirred. "Sir, you can't bring that animal inside," Ben said firmly, though his raised hand halted them gently, his voice weary yet not unkind. "This is a private bank. No pets allowed." He added, his presence less confrontational and more resigned. Randall stood firm, refusing to retreat or raise his voice. Instead, he straightened his back, rising to his full 6-foot stature with quiet resolve. The pain in his leg screamed now that the blood rushed back, a fiery torment beneath his skin, but his face remained unmoving, carved from stone. "He's no pet," Randall said, his voice calm but heavy with authority. "He's a service animal. I'm not here to bank," he continued, eyes steady. Ben met Blizzard's unflinching amber gaze, sensing the dog's solemn purpose. The dog showed no sign of aggression. Only a profound seriousness filled its silent stare, leaving Ben caught in hesitation. "I understand, Sir," Ben replied, softening, "but I still need to see proof for the dog and your appointment." "We don't have any walk-ins today," Ben added, glancing at the gloomy weather, "especially not with these conditions." Randall shifted weight to his crutch, unwavering. He knew how he appeared, a wanderer, a hitchhiker seeking warmth. In Ben's eyes, that was trouble to be contained, nothing more. Slowly, deliberately, Randall reached inside his shirt, bypassing the wallet's familiar bulk. Instead, his hand found the chain resting at his neck. From it, he pulled 2 dull metal tags suspended quietly. They clinked softly, bearing the marks of time-worn edges and a faded patina far from the polished shine of new honors. Attached below them, sealed in a plastic pouch to guard against moisture, lay a small folded piece of paper. Randall extended the tags, their silent sway, like a pendulum in the still air. "Read it," he urged. Ben leaned in, squinting at the stamped lettering. Cooper Randall, United States Army, 1971. Ben looked up surprise, softening his gaze as his eyes traveled from the veteran's leg to the crutch. Respect took root. "Thank you for your service," Sir Ben said automatically, though the dog policy still weighed heavily on his mind. Then Ben asked quietly, "Who's the appointment with Randall?" Unclipped the plastic pouch fingers stiff from arthritis and cold, struggling with the seal. Blizzard, sensing his struggle, nudged Randall's hand gently with his nose, steadying it. Randall withdrew the letter. Old stationery, thick cream-colored, now yellowed and creased from time passing. The writing was uneven and trembling, as if penned by a hand trembling with age or emotion. "I'm here to see Wallace," Sterling Randall stated simply. The lobby fell silent, shadows deepening around them. Ben blinked, staring at the letter, then back at Randall, his eyes widening. "Mr. Sterling," Ben's voice dropped to a mere whisper. "Sir, Mr. Sterling passed away 6 months ago." The whole city knows that Randall answered quietly, the grief in his gut a familiar, bitter knot. "Still, he told me to be here today. November 30th, he added. "He left something for me." Ben studied the letter again, noting the signature at the bottom, clear and unmistakable. It matched perfectly the name etched into the brass plaque outside. "Wait here," Ben instructed, stepping back. "Don't move." He hurried to his desk, urgency gripping him as he grabbed the phone and called the executive floor. Randall stood alone in the grand lobby, water trickling from his soaked boots onto the polished marble floor. He felt the piercing gazes of the affluent patrons fixed on his back. Their judgment, their disdain weighed on him, but he looked down at Blizzard, the dog, motionless, steadfast, unwavering at his side. He sat upright, his body a warm shield against the room's biting cold, his gaze locked on Randall. For a fleeting moment, his tail tapped lightly against the floor. A silent message, a secret code that whispered, "I'm here. We stand together." Randall reached down, resting his hand gently on the dog's head, fingers sinking into the thick silver fur. "Good boy, Blizzard," Randall murmured. "Hold steady." He drew in a steadying breath, inhaling the mingled scents of lilies and money, bracing himself. He had kept his vow, survived the storm. Whatever awaited him now, he was prepared. Time dragged in the Sterling Heights lobby, each agonizing second stretching endlessly. Randall Cooper stood alone in the vast marble hall, a solitary island of worn leather and soaked denim in a sea of polished stone. His leg throbbed a deep, unyielding pulse where flesh met cold, prosthetic, chilled dampness creeping in from the storm outside. Blizzard sat quietly at his right, perfectly still, his German shepherd ears twitching, catching every subtle sound, the elevator's drone soft typing at the desk, the wind's distant howl battering glass. To an outsider, the dog seemed at rest, but Randall knew better. Blizzard was on alert, scanning, analyzing, protecting. From the security desk, Ben's low, urgent voice cracked the silence. Eyes flicking nervously toward Randall, torn between the strict rules of his duty and the heavy weight of the old soldier standing there. Randall shifted his stance, trying to ease pressure on his stump, closing his eyes briefly, letting the sterile air of the bank wash over him. It smelled of money, of a world that had moved on without him. Suddenly, the elevator's melodic chime sliced through the stillness. The brass doors parted smoothly with a hiss. A burst of energy spilled forth, a man flanked by a younger aide struggling to keep pace. The man was young, probably in his early 30s, with a predatory charm that belonged on magazine covers. His charcoal gray suit tailored to perfection, shimmering under the chandelier's glow. Speaking rapidly into a wireless headset, his voice sharp-edged with frustration. "I don't care what the projections say," he snapped, striding through the lobby with single-minded purpose. "If we don't close the Asian markets by noon, the quarterly bonus is dead. Tell them to slash overhead. Yes, slash it." He moved swiftly, eyes locked on the revolving doors, thoughts clearly a world away amid the chaos of the trading floor. He never saw the old man, nor the silver dog. To him, they were mere obstacles, part of the background he was far too important to acknowledge. Randall caught sight of him and tried to step aside, yielding the path as he'd done countless times before, but slowed by cold and pain in his leg. He attempted to pivot on his crutch, only to have the rubber tip slip on a slick patch of melting snow. "Look out," Randall started to warn, but the words caught in his throat. The man in the charcoal suit crashed into Randall's shoulder, not with brute force, but at that speed, the momentum was enough. Randall stumbled, the world tilting askew, his wooden crutch crashing sharply against the cold marble floor. Like a puck sliding on ice, Randall fell hard. The heavy, sickening thud of his body hitting the ground echoed his hip, bearing the cruel blow. A sharp gasp of pain escaped him as a shockwave shot up his spine. Blizzard was instantly on his feet. Without barking or growling, Blizzard moved with smooth, deadly grace, positioning himself firmly between Randall and the man. His muscles taut and poised, the suited man wobbled, but stayed upright, quickly regaining his balance. He spun around, annoyance etched on his face, never once meeting Randall's gaze or extending a hand. His eyes immediately flicked to his jacket, scrutinizing the fabric for damage. "Unbelievable," he hissed. Frantically brushing at his sleeve where it had touched Randall's damp jacket, he spat, "Look at this Italian silk." The younger assistant, a nervous man named Todd, clutching a tablet, rushed forward, terror written all over his face. Shifting anxiously between his boss and the fallen elder, he asked Mr. McKay, "Are you all right?" "I'm fine, Todd. But my schedule is not," the man snapped, casting a cold glance at Randall. For the first time, he truly looked at him. No recognition, no compassion, only sheer disgust. His eyes caught the duct tape on Randall's boots, the spreading puddle on the marble floor. "Todd, clean this mess up," he ordered sharply, dismissing Randall with a wave as if he were no more than spilled coffee. "Get security to clear the lobby. We have investors arriving at 2 o'clock. Teeth clenched in humiliation, stronger than the ache in his hip, Randall pushed himself up into a sitting position. His crutch was just out of reach, the sting of shame burning fiercer than the pain. Blizzard stepped forward gently, gripping the wooden crutch with his jaws, and brought it back to Randall's hand. The dog's amber eyes locked fiercely on the suited man, unwavering and intense. "Thank you, Blizzard," Randall whispered, clasping the wood. Using Blizzard's shoulder to steady himself, he pushed up his prosthetic leg, clicking softly as it locked into place. Standing swaying slightly as he reclaimed his pride, the name the assistant had used echoed in his mind, freezing him more than the storm raging outside. "McKay." Randall studied the man's sharp profile. He noticed the tense, raised shoulders, the slightly crooked nose just like his own. Blood drained from Randall's face, the pain in his leg forgotten, replaced by a long, dormant ache deep in his heart. "Excuse me." Randall's voice cracked rough, not from age, but from overwhelming emotion. The man in the suit, already turning away, paused and glanced back impatiently. "What do you want? I have no cash, if that's your question." "Todd, handle him," McKay ordered abruptly. Randall spoke the title aloud, feeling its weight strange on his tongue as he stepped forward, the rubber tip of his crutch squeaking softly on the wet stone. The man froze, turning fully to face him, eyes narrowing sharply. "How do you know my name?" Staring into the eyes of this wealthy, proud, arrogant young man, Randall searched for the shadow of the friend he had lost in the jungle's mud. "Are you—" Randall, his voice cracked. "Are you Frank McKay's son?" The question hit like a thunderclap, igniting an immediate, fierce reaction. The man's face morphed. Irritation vanished, replaced by a sudden, dark tempest of fury. That fury warped his once handsome features into something twisted and ugly. The air around him seemed to chill by 10 degrees as he stepped toward Randall. Closing in on the old man's personal space, he hissed, "Who are you?" His voice dropped to a low, dangerous whisper. "How do you know that name?" It was a cruel sound, sharp and jagged like the shatter of breaking glass. "You served with him," Landon mocked bitterly. "So what, you were his drinking buddy, one of the drunks he dragged home from the bar to terrorize my mother. It wasn't like that. Frank was a good man. Don't talk to me about Frank McKay. He was a drunk of failure. He died, owing half the city money, leaving me nothing but a busted name." Landon straightened his tie, hands trembling with suppressed rage. He glared at Randall, venom renewed. "I am nothing like him," Landon hissed. "I built this branch from scratch. I wiped his disgrace off my name. So if you're here hunting for a handout, because you shared a bottle with him 3 decades ago, you're in the wrong place. Randall stood swallowing the poison in Landon's words. He longed to defend his friend, to tell this raging man about that night when mortar shells rained down, when soldiers carried each other through fire and smoke. To speak of the letters Frank had written, but never sent. Yet he couldn't. The promise he made to Frank, an oath sworn in a hospital bed soaked in antiseptic, sealed his lips tight. Let him hate me, Randall thought silently. That's the only way he'll walk away. Let him hate me so he can rise above me. So Randall kept silent, his gaze locked on Landon. Eyes, ancient and weighted with deep, aching sorrow. Sorry to bother you, Randall whispered. Landon sneered, turning away, muttering, "Stay out of my path, I've got a bank to run." His expensive shoes clicked sharply against the floor as he moved off, but he didn't get far before a low, rumbling noise stopped him. It wasn't a growl, it was deeper, a vibrating thunder from the chest. Landon halted, turning slowly. Blizzard. The massive silver dog now stood squarely in his path. The great beast was not crouched nor showing teeth. He simply stood tall, head held high, ears pricked forward. Blizzard's stance radiated quiet strength. But it was his eyes that froze Landon in place. Blizzard looked at him with a piercing, razor-sharp intelligence. That gaze stripped away the fabric of Landon's expensive suit, tore down his title and arrogance. It saw straight through to the fear and fury burning underneath. "Move your dog," Landon commanded, voice trembling ever so slightly. Blizzard didn't flinch. He stared, unblinking his presence, a silent, unyielding judgment, as if to say, "I see you. I see what you're doing, and it's wrong." Uneasy, Landon took half a step back, eyes flicking between the dog and the old man. He saw the unspoken bond, the thread of loyalty Landon had never known. Todd Landon shouted, voice cracking. "Get security." Randall whistled a soft 2-note call. "Blizzard heel," he said gently. The spell shattered. The dog broke eye contact with Landon. He turned quietly and settled back beside Randall, resting his shoulder gently against the old man's leg once more. Landon stood frozen for a moment, his chest rising and falling, his face drained of color, eyes fixed on the pair one last time. The worn soldier crippled by time, and the silent silver guardian at his side, there was a weight between them that spoke volumes. Landon seemed ready to speak, to deliver a final, crushing blow, but something in the dog's steady gaze unsettled him. He straightened his jacket, cleared his throat, and without a backward glance barked, "Todd, my office now." He strode toward the elevators, no longer with the assured pace of a victor, but with the hurried, uneven steps of a man fleeing from a haunting memory. Randall watched the elevator doors seal shut, cutting off all view of Frank McKay's son. He exhaled a long, shuddering breath, his hand trembling as it reached down to stroke Blizzard's head. The dog leaned in, sharing his warmth, offering steadfast comfort and strength. "You saw it too, didn't you, boy?" Randall whispered. Blizzard lifted his gaze and gently licked Randall's hand. "He has Frank's eyes," Randall said. A tear finally slipped free, carving a path through the dust on his cheek. "But there's so much pain behind them." Randall leaned heavily on his crutch. The physical fall was painful, yes? But it was the fire of hatred in his best friend's son's eyes that shattered something deep inside him, something no doctor could ever mend. Sir came Ben, the security guard, returning, pale, and clutching a phone handset to his chest. He had clearly witnessed the entire scene. His face reflected a mix of awe and pity. "Sir, I'm sorry about that. Mr. McKay's temper can be intense." Randall brushed away the apology with a wave. "It's not your fault, son. Did you reach the executive floor?" Ben nodded. He glanced at the letter in Randall's hand, then back at the phone. "Yes, sir. They verified the signature and the appointment." Ben paused, swallowing hard. "Mr. Sterling's personal lawyer is on their way down. They're preparing to open the private vault for you, Vault 71. Randall nodded, slowly drained from the confrontation with Landon, but aware the task was far from over. He had to see this through for Wallace, for the memories of the men who never made it home. "Lead the way," Randall said, following the guard toward the secure wing of the bank. Outside, the wind howled against the glass, the storm intensifying. But inside the bank, the true storm was only just beginning. The secure wing of Sterling Heights was an entirely different world. If the lobby was meant to impress, this place was crafted to command respect and fear. Walls lined with brushed steel, soundproof floors, and air kept precisely chilled to protect the fragile documents housed within. Ben led Randall and Blizzard to a heavy door marked with the number 3. He swiped his badge, and the lock disengaged with a deep mechanical thud. "He's waiting for you inside," Sir Ben said respectfully. Randall nodded his thanks and stepped through. In the small, private viewing room, a woman awaited. She appeared to be in her 60s, with gentle eyes framed by practical glasses, and her hair drawn back in a loose bun. Her name tag read, Chelsea. "Mr. Cooper," she said, her voice warm and free of the judgment Randall had felt in the lobby. "I am Chelsea. I was Mr." For 20 years, Randall had been Sterling's personal account manager. As he arrived, a lump caught in his throat. "You knew," Wallace, Chelsea said with a wistful smile. "He spoke about you often. You were the only man he trusted." To watch his back when the world was burning, Randall whispered, eyes dropping to his worn boots. Wallace had always been a drama king, yet the memory of his friend alive laughing felt nearer than it had in years. Blizzard settled quietly in the corner, chin resting on his paws, ever vigilant. His eyes never left the door, still on watch. Chelsea moved toward the fortress of safety deposit boxes, sliding a master key into box number 71. She waited patiently for Randall to produce the key enclosed with the letter. Randall's hands trembled. Fingers stiff, he finally guided the small brass key into the lock. A soft click echoed as it turned. Randall held his breath, expecting perhaps a dusty bottle of cheap Saigon whiskey, or the medal Wallace always joked he didn't deserve. Chelsea eased out a long metal drawer and placed it reverently on the polished mahogany table. "Open it, Randall," she whispered. Randall's hand reached in. Lifting the metal lid revealed almost nothing. No whiskey, no metal, just an old, battered Zippo lighter. Its chrome worn down to the brass beneath, alongside a single stack of documents bound in a worn blue legal folder. Randall picked up the lighter. His thumb grazed the flint wheel, an automatic flick, and a tiny flame sparked to life in the dim room. This lighter had survived monsoon rains, sparked countless campfires that kept darkness away. To Randall, it was worth more than the building around them. He chuckled softly. "You kept it, you old fool," Chelsea said, voice trembling with affection. "Now please look at the documents." Randall set the lighter down and opened the blue folder, expecting a letter, a farewell. Instead, he found legal jargon, trust agreements, beneficiary designations, and numbers. "I don't understand these numbers." Randall squinted at the fine print. "I'm no lawyer, Chelsea. What is this?" Chelsea moved to the computer terminal, typing in a series of codes from the documents. "Wallace didn't just leave you a keepsake," she said, pressing enter. "He left you everything." The screen flickered to life, displaying a summary of the Wallace Sterling Revocable Trust. Numbers scrolled as interest, dividends, and asset liquidation values calculated. Finally, the total settled at the bottom, bold and glowing in bright green digits. Randall blinked in disbelief, his mind struggling to comprehend the figure before him. $58 million. Silence enveloped the room, broken only by the soft hum of the computer fan. "This has to be a mistake." Randall's voice was flat, haunted by disbelief. "No mistake," Chelsea replied gently. "Wallace had no family. He invested wisely, saved carefully, and arranged this trust 10 years ago. He named you the sole beneficiary." Randall recoiled as if the papers burned his hands. Shaking his head violently, No, I don't want this. I live in a cabin," he insisted. "I have my dog, my truck. I don't need this. This is too much. It's a weight I can't carry." Before Chelsea could answer, the heavy door to the viewing room crashed open. Landon McKay stormed inside, his face flushed with urgency, his earlier arrogance replaced by frantic energy. He must have received an alert from his system the moment Chelsea touched the VIP account. "What the hell is going on here?" Landon demanded, striding toward the screen with purpose. His former arrogance dissolved into wild, frantic energy, sharp and alert, as though his own system had just sounded a dire warning. The instant Chelsea logged into the VIP account, Landon's voice thundered, "What exactly is happening here?" as he strode purposefully toward the screen. The system alerted to a Level 1 asset activation as someone accessed the Sterling Trust. He froze, eyes locked on the screen. The figure on the display was $58 million, and then his gaze shifted to the elderly man clad in a worn-out flannel shirt. This was the same man he had knocked down in the lobby, the one he had harshly spoken to. Landon's mouth hung open, but no sound escaped. His mind grappled with disbelief. He struggled to reconcile the image of this weathered, destitute veteran with the staggering fortune illuminated before him. That scruffy, broken old man was no pauper. He was a titan, the most significant client that Branch had encountered in half a decade. Suddenly, the screen shifted. The calm green digits flared into an alarming crimson, and a dialogue box emerged, pulsating like a heartbeat faltering in its final moments. The warning tone filled the room with a chilling rhythm reading plainly, "Dead man switch active, expiration imminent." "What does that mean?" Landon asked, panic rising in his voice. Chelsea's face drained of color. She leaned over the keyboard, scrutinizing the trust's fine print. "Oh no," she whispered. Wallace set a stipulation. To confirm the beneficiary's presence and life, the trust demands full activation with signed originals of identification documents before the fiscal year closes. She glanced at the digital clock on the screen, November 30th. The fiscal year ended today. Landon checked the time. It was just past noon. "Then get it signed," Landon barked, gesturing at Randall. "Find a pen, sign the papers." "It's not that straightforward, Mr. McKay," Chelsea replied, her tone steady amid the pressure. "The system requires the original discharge papers and birth certificate to be scanned for biometric verification. Federal regulations for this amount aren't up for debate." She turned to Randall. "Do you have those original documents with you?" Randall felt the dog tags hanging from his neck. "I have these and a letter," he responded. "That won't suffice," Chelsea said, desperation creeping into her voice. "We need the actual paper documents, the ones embossed with raised seals." Landon gripped the mahogany table's edge, his knuckles bleaching white. "And if we don't get them?" Landon asked, already fearing the answer. Chelsea read from the screen's last clause. "If activation is not completed by 11:59 p.m. on November 30th, the trust dissolves. The entire sum is instantly transferred to a blind charity holding account. The bank loses the assets and the beneficiary gets nothing." Silence swallowed this room once more. Randall's eyes flicked from the screen to Landon, then to Chelsea. He reached down and picked up a battered Zippo lighter, slipping it into his pocket. "Well," Randall said, adjusting his crutch, "that settles it. I have what I came for." He whistled softly to his dog, Blizzard. "Let's go home." Randall began to turn away. Money no longer mattered to him. $58 million was just a looming headache he wished to avoid. He had the lighter. He had the memory. That was enough. But for Landon McKay, it was the opposite, a disaster in motion. He stood frozen, mind racing. His quarterly target was falling short. The board was scrutinizing him. If this sum, $58 million, slipped through his fingers on a technicality, he'd become the joke of the industry, fired without mercy, cast back down to the bottom, just like his father before him. "No," Landon roared, lunging forward to block the exit. Blizzard by his side, ready to stand firm. Instantly he rose, a deep rumble vibrating from his chest, placing himself between Landon and Randall. Landon recoiled, pressed back against the doorframe. Yet desperation held him firmly in place. "You can't just walk away," Landon gasped, sweat dripping down his brow. "Mr. Cooper, you can't just let $58 million slip away." Randall's voice was calm, composed. "Watch me," he replied. "Step aside, son." "No, listen to me," Landon begged, his voice breaking. "If that money leaves this bank, my branch will collapse. I will fail." "Sounds like your problem," Randall retorted coldly. Stepping forward, Landon glanced at the clock. 11 hours left. Where are the papers? He demanded, his words tumbling out so fast they almost merged. Randall sighed heavily. "Though the originals." They're in my lockbox beneath my bed at my cabin up on Blackwood Ridge. Landon's eyes widened. Blackwood Ridge was 2 hours away on a clear day, and today a blizzard was shutting down the interstate. It was a fortress. "We have to get them," Landon declared. Randall shook his head. "The storm's too fierce, my truck's too old, and the heater's broken. I won't risk my dog to chase paper," Randall declared firmly. "I'll drive," Landon blurted out. The words hung heavy between them. Chelsea stared at her boss, utterly stunned. Landon McKay never left the office. He certainly never volunteered for hard labor. "I own a car." Landon continued, desperation fraying his nerves. A custom SUV, four-wheel drive, heated seats, satellite navigation. It was built to conquer any obstacle. He looked to Randall, eyes stripped of arrogance, raw and pleading. "Please, Mr. Cooper, I need this. I will drive. We get the papers, then we come back and sign." Randall studied the young man, sensing panic, a profound terror of failure, so tangible it weighed on the air, fear he had once glimpsed in Frank's eyes a lifetime ago. Randall lowered his gaze to Blizzard, who met it calmly, waiting for a signal. "It's a fool's errand," Randall warned. "The roads will be ice." "I'm a skilled driver," Landon lied. "Please!" Randall fingered the Zippo in his pocket. Wallace had orchestrated this, picked the date. Was this the last cruel joke or a final test? Randall pictured Landon's pricey suit coated now in snow and mud. The long, silent drive ahead, the inevitable reckoning with their past. "If we go?" Randall said slowly, his tone steel. The dog rides up front in the back seat, not caged. Landon studied the wet, shedding German shepherd, then his flawless Italian leather interior. He thought of 58 million vanishing at midnight. "Fine," Landon gasped. "The dog rides shotgun, you drive carefully. I survived a war. I'm not about to die in a bank manager's car," Landon promised, already reaching for his keys. "Let's move." Randall released a deep, weary sigh, as if it echoed from his very bones. He steadied his grip on his crutch. "Lead the way, McKay. But if you crash us, I'm telling Frank when I see him in the next life." Landon winced at the name, but without hesitation he dashed for the door. The clock in his mind ticked louder than the storm outside. Inside Landon McKay's custom SUV, designed as a sanctuary, all was calm and precise. A masterpiece of German engineering, a hermetically sealed capsule of hand-stitched leather, brushed aluminum and soundproof glass meant to shield its passengers from the brutal world. But today that sanctuary faced the storm head-on. As it sliced through the swirling white fury of the blizzard on Interstate 70, the cabin felt less like a refuge and more like the confines of a cold prison cell. Inside the cabin, silence hung heavy, thick, almost choking. The only sounds were mere whispers against the stillness. The steady, relentless beat of the windshield wipers waged a losing war against the swirling snow, while the distant, muted growl of the wind struggled to breach the car's defenses. The heater buzzed steadily, battling the cold to maintain a sharp, exact temperature of 70 degrees inside the cabin. Outside, just beyond the glass, the bitter storm raged, an unforgiving contrast to the warmth within, as Landon clutched the leather-wrapped steering wheel. His knuckles blanched and trembled slightly. He leaned in, eyes hard and focused, staring into the swirling abyss of white ahead. The headlights pierced through the murky gloom, casting light onto countless snowflakes streaming toward the windshield, like stars racing through hyperspace. Every muscle in his body was wound tight. The digital clock glowed 1:15 p.m. He had less than 11 hours. 11 hours to climb a mountain swallowed by this historic storm, to find a piece of paper hidden in a powerless shack, and return to the bank before the last grain of time erased his entire career. In the passenger seat, Randall Cooper sat motionless, a weathered statue who had peeled back his worn leather jacket to reveal a faded flannel shirt. His rough hands rested on a wooden crutch wedged between his knees, his gaze fixed out the window. Pine trees blurred into gray streaks, vanishing into the fog. He remained silent. No advice escaped his lips, no criticism uttered. Just a quiet, aged presence whose mere existence gnawed at Landon's nerves more than any spoken word could. And then there was the smell. Despite the car's sophisticated air filtration, the unmistakable scent of wet dog began to infiltrate the luxurious interior. That earthy, damp animal musk clashed violently with the sharp aroma of Landon's expensive cologne and the pristine leather seats. Landon's nose wrinkled, his jaw clenched in silent frustration. He yearned to speak out, to yell at the old man for bringing this creature into his car. He longed to pull over and scream at the cruel fate of it all. But he held back. He needed the old man. He needed the signature, and there in the back seat, a subtle shift disturbed the silence. Blizzard, the majestic silver shepherd, wasn't lying on the floor mats as Landon had hoped. He sat upright, alert head turned toward the road between the front seats. His two amber eyes glowed softly in the dim light, reflecting like twin beacons in the rearview mirror. Those same eerie, intelligent eyes that had unsettled Landon earlier in the bank lobby now watched him quietly. Without warning, the silence cracked with a sharp electronic chime. An incoming call illuminated the dashboard screen, and Landon's stomach twisted when he saw the name. Violet. Landon hesitated, unwilling to answer, not now, certainly not with the stranger beside him. Yet if he ignored the call, she might vanish for weeks, swallowed by silence. With a tense breath, Landon pressed the answer button. "Violet," he said, voice strained. "I'm driving, I can't really talk right now." Her voice filled the cab, crystal clear and chilling through the premium surround sound, cold, distant, utterly devoid of warmth. "I'm not calling to chat," Violet said, voice like ice fracturing under pressure. Landon's eyes flicked to Randall, who sat as still as stone, but Landon knew the old man was listening. A flush of shame crept up his neck. "Violet, can we talk about this later?" His voice tightened with desperation. "Leo is coming along with me and my parents." Landon nearly lost control of the SUV, drifting suddenly into the slick, slushy middle lane. Then he yanked the wheel back with a sharp jerk. No, Violet, that's not what we agreed on. This year is mine. Christmas is my turn. We settled this in mediation," Violet replied, her tone dismissive and flat. "But Leo doesn't want to be with you, Landon." "Wait." "He says he hates your apartment. He says you're always on the phone." She hesitated, and the quiet that followed cut deeper than the storm outside. "He says he feels lonely when he's with you," Violet finished softly, the weight of her words sinking deep. Those words struck Landon like a crushing blow to the chest. The air left his lungs. His 6-year-old boy felt isolated even when he was with him. Clenching the wheel tighter, Landon protested. "That's not true. I take him out, I get him everything he wants." "Buying gifts isn't the same as being a father." Violet sighed heavily. "Look, I'm not going to force him. He wants to go skiing with his cousins. I'm taking him. We can talk about your visitation rights come January." "Violet, you can't do this." Landon's voice cracked, and raised desperation dripping from every word. "I've got presents. I've made plans." "Send the presents," she replied coldly. "Goodbye, Landon." The line went dead, the call ending with a sharp electronic beep. The cabin slipped once again into silence, but this one felt heavier, dense with shame, laden with the wreckage of a man's life laid bare for a stranger's judgment. Landon stared at the highway ahead as his vision blurred. Vulnerable. Defeated. Here he was director of a major bank, a man who wielded millions with a keystroke. And yet he couldn't persuade his own son, barely 6, to spend a holiday by his side. "He feels lonely when he's with you." The echo echoed relentlessly, haunting him deeper than any storm. It reminded him of his father, Frank McKay, a failure, a drunk who died alone. Landon had spent his entire life running from that harsh legacy, constructing a fortress of wealth and success to shield himself from solitude. But here he was sitting in his $50,000 car, dressed in a $2,000 suit, realizing the bitter truth: he had arrived at the same lonely destination. A fierce, blinding rage erupted in his chest, a combustible mix of fury at Violet, the relentless storm, the coldness of the bank, but most of all, fury at himself. Landon let out a guttural yell of frustration, slamming his palm down hard on the steering wheel. The leather absorbed the dull thud beneath his forceful strike. "Damn it!" he roared, his voice ricocheting in the confined space. "Damn it all!" He struck the wheel again, this time with greater force. The car swerved slightly on the icy road, the traction control light flashing wildly on the dashboard. Randall remained silent. He didn't urge Landon to calm down or warn him to focus on the road. He simply studied Landon's face, inscrutable and still. Landon's breath came in rapid, shallow gasps, now his chest heaving as panic clawed at him. His heartbeat pounded frantically beneath his ribs, like a frantic bird trapped inside a cage, overwhelmed by quota pressures, the sting of humiliation and sheer physical exhaustion. It was all crashing over him at once. He felt as though he was slipping beneath the surface, drowning in despair. From the back seat, Blizzard stirred. The dog didn't bark or whine. Instead, he rose smoothly to stand, balancing steadily through the SUV's sway. Leaning forward, the dog pressed his head into the narrow space between the two front seats. Suddenly, Landon felt a strong, steady nudge against his right arm. Startled, he looked down. Blizzard had shoved his long, damp snout beneath Landon's elbow, nudging forcefully. It wasn't a gentle touch. It was a purposeful shove. "Get off!" Landon snapped, trying to pull his arm away, but the dog persisted. Blizzard ignored the protest, pressing onward, this time resting his heavy head squarely on Landon's forearm, a silent anchor amid the storm. Right over the taut muscles clenched around the gear shift, Landon tried to nudge the dog away with his elbow, but Blizzard stood firm, unyielding, letting out a long, deep exhale through his nose, a sound almost like a weary sigh. He pressed his cheek gently against Landon's costly suit jacket, leaving behind a damp smear of melting snow. Landon glanced into the rearview mirror, bracing for anger, expecting to see a wild animal invading his space. Instead, he met amber eyes, calm, soft, and deeply understanding. Blizzard wasn't watching the road. He was staring right into Landon's reflection. The dog's ears slanted back slightly, a quiet gesture of peace, but his touch remained steadfast and unshakable. He knows Randall spoke for the first time since they'd left the city, his voice steady. Landon froze. "What does he know?" Landon asked. Randall replied softly, gazing out the window. "He smells the cortisol. When you get stressed, your body floods with chemicals. To Blizzard, you smell like fear. You carry the scent of pain." Landon lowered his gaze to the dog's head, resting lightly on his arm. The fur was damp, rough beneath his fingers. The dog's warmth radiated fiercely, seeping through the layers of his suit, heating his skin. "He's grounding you," Randall continued. "It's a lesson I taught him for when flashbacks hit hard, when I lose track of where I am. He anchors me. He reminds me that I'm right here, that I'm still alive." A sharp lump formed in Landon's throat, painful raw. He wanted to push Blizzard away to keep his walls tight, but the warmth was undeniable, real. The weight of that dog's head was steady, unbreakable. For the first time in years, Landon didn't feel like a corporate executive. He didn't feel like a broken father or a failed husband. He felt like a man unraveling, and this creature, this loyal animal he'd once banned from his lobby, was holding him together. Landon's grip on the wheel relaxed, his knuckles regaining their color breath, syncing with the dog's deep, steady breathing. "He's dampening your suit," Randall noted, but there was no judgment in his tone. Landon glanced down at the wet patch on his sleeve. He caught sight of the dog's silver lashes and whispered hoarsely, "It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter." Slowly hesitating, he pried his right hand from the steering wheel, fingers frozen mid-air, before lowering it with care. He rested his palm gently on Blizzard's head. The fur behind the ears was soft. Blizzard closed his eyes and leaned further into the touch. A low, rumbling purr of contentment vibrated through Landon's arm and settled deep in his chest. He stroked the dog's head, tracing the curve of the skull in a steady, soothing rhythm, calming himself in that simple, repetitive motion. It was the first time he'd touched a living being in what felt like forever, without needing anything in return. No bargain or exchange, just pure connection. "Thank you," Landon whispered softly. He wasn't speaking to Randall. Blizzard didn't move. He stayed right there, his head resting on the armrest, bridging the space between the front seats. A living tether holding together the man lost in the storm within himself. Landon shifted his eyes back to the road ahead. Snow still fell relentlessly, the wind still howled, and the deadline loomed unyielding. But the silence inside the SUV no longer suffocated. It was shared, peaceful. As the luxury vehicle began the steep ascent through the mountain pass, leaving the city's safety behind, Landon McKay kept his hand buried deep in blizzard silver fur, clutching on for dear life. The highway's asphalt had long vanished, replaced by the treacherous gravel and packed earth of Blackwood Ridge. The storm was not merely falling, it was raging. The wind whipped the snow into blinding sheets that crashed mercilessly against the SUV's windshield. The wipers struggled beneath the heavy drifts as Landon McKay leaned over the steering wheel, his eyes straining against the blinding white void. The sleek navigation system on the dashboard had surrendered 10 minutes earlier, now showing only a blank grid where the path should have been. "I think we're lost," Landon muttered, panic rising in his chest like a bitter poison. "The GPS says there's no road here." "There is a road," Randall said, calm but firm from the passenger seat. "You just can't see it beneath 2 feet of snow. Keep the wheels in the ruts. Don't touch the brakes." But Landon hit the brakes. It was a reflex, a flicker of hesitation as a dark shape, maybe a fallen branch or a shadow, loomed in the headlights. He tapped the pedal, a fatal error. The heavy SUV, nearly 3 tons, lost traction instantly. The anti-lock braking system hummed violently, a rapid mechanical tremor that failed to halt the slide. The rear of the vehicle swung wide, drifting in a slow, sickening arc toward the edge of the narrow trail. "No, no, no!" Landon shouted, wrestling the wheel, but gravity won. The car slid off the packed gravel and plunged nose first into the drainage ditch. The ditch ran alongside the logging road, and the vehicle groaned as its undercarriage slammed brutally against the earth. It tilted sharply to the left before coming to a jolting stop. The engine died, and heavy silence flooded back, thick and foreboding. "Are you okay?" Randall asked instantly, reaching back to check on Blizzard. The dog let out a sharp whine but seemed unharmed. Landon braced against the front seat, said nothing. His gaze locked on the dashboard clock, 3:45 p.m. He turned the key again. The engine roared back to life, but shifting into reverse and stomping the gas did nothing. The tires spun madly, gripping nothing. A sharp, high-pitched whine of burning rubber filled the cabin as the speedometer climbed futilely, but the trees outside remained steadfast. "Stop," Randall commanded. "You're digging us deeper." Landon ignored him, shifting between drive and reverse. The car rocked violently. The smell of scorched rubber and burning transmission fluid crept through the vents, a warning no man wanted to admit. "I said stop!" Randall's voice cracked like a whip. Landon slammed his hands onto the steering wheel, chest heaving. Then he threw open the door and stumbled into the storm. The cold hit him like a savage blow, the wind ripping through his fine suit jacket, instantly soaking the wool. Landon staggered toward the front of the car, his Italian leather loafers sinking deep into the freezing mash of snow and mud. He stared at the wheels buried up to the axles in thick, clay-like sludge. The front bumper was wedged against a hidden stump. "We're stuck!" Landon screamed, his voice thin and brittle over the roaring wind. "We're stuck!" He kicked the tire in a desperate, powerless rage, his foot slipping on slick rubber. Arms flailing helplessly, he crashed hard into the ditch, landing on his side in the icy, griping muck. The frigid slime seeped through his trousers, instantly soaking his underwear and coating his hands. He gasped, struggling to his knees. Looking down at himself, his suit, his armor, his emblem of success now ruined and drenched in filth. He whispered, "It's over," tears freezing on his cheeks. Landon sobbed. It's all over. He remained on his knees, broken, waiting for the cold to claim him. Then, through the relentless blizzard, he heard the passenger door creak open. Landon's eyes lifted, catching sight of Randall Cooper stepping out into the swirling snow. But the old man didn't reach for his crutch or try to stand. Instead, Randall quietly settled on the edge of the car's door frame. With practiced, trembling fingers, he rolled up the right leg of his worn jeans and began undoing the leather straps that held his prosthetic leg in place. Landon watched in frozen disbelief. "What are you doing?" he called out. Randall said nothing as he carefully detached the heavy plastic and metal limb. He leaned back, gently placing the artificial leg on the dry car seat. Then the 75-year-old man slid down and fell into the biting snow. He landed hard on his left knee and the raw stump of his right leg. Mr. Cooper Landon shouted, but Randall ignored him, crawling forward with fierce resolve. He dragged himself across the icy, freezing mud that Landon was kneeling in, inching his way toward the rear of the vehicle. Blizzard sprang from the car, landing softly in the snow. The dog didn't run away. Instead, he moved immediately beside Randall, whining softly in concern. "Dig, Blizzard." Randall rasped, pressing a hand to the old man's muddy shoulder dig near the tire. The dog understood instantly, clawing fiercely with his paws, sending sprays of mud and snow flying behind him. As Blizzard cleared the buried wheel, Randall pulled himself up to the trunk, opened the hatch, and hauled out the heavy rubber floor mats and the emergency jack handle. Then, grimacing, he crawled back towards the stuck tire. Landon was paralyzed with shame, watching the old man's pale, strained face in pain as Randall moved his stump forward, each scrape through ice and rock hidden beneath the mud. It had to be agony. The nerve endings in a stump were notoriously sensitive, yet Randall grit his teeth, grinding his into the frozen earth for one purpose: to save a bank manager's career. Reaching the front tire, Randall wedged the rubber mat beneath it, then grabbed a jagged rock from the ditch and firmly lodged it under the mat. "Get in the car!" Mackay Randall shouted hoarsely over the howling wind, his voice raw with urgency. Blinking in disbelief, Landon heard him again. "Get in the car!" Randall's mud-streaked face and ice-matted beard were desperate. "Drive. I'll push," Landon stuttered. "You can't push. You don't have a leg." "I have one good leg and a dog," Randall roared back. "Don't argue. Get in and drive or we'll both freeze out here." Shoving back into the driver's seat, Landon scrambled over the slippery ground, hands trembling so badly he barely gripped the wheel. "On my count," Randall called from outside. He had positioned himself behind the front bumper, his strong leg digging into the mud shoulder pressed against the grill. Blizzard stood beside him, paws braced against the car, mirroring his master's stance. 1, 2, 3, go. Landon slammed the gas pedal. The engine roared, tires spinning wildly, but catching the rubber mat beneath. The vehicle lunged forward, then slid back. Randall screamed encouragement. Landon pressed harder, hearing a grunt of sheer effort from outside. The sound of tearing echoed. In the side mirror, Landon saw Randall's face contorted in a fierce struggle. The tire gripped the rock. Suddenly, a jolt of traction surged through the SUV. "Go, go, go!" Landon kept his foot pinned down. The SUV groaned and shuddered. Then, with a wet sucking noise, it popped free of the ditch, clawing its way back onto the gravel road. Landon slammed on the brakes, throwing the car into park with a breathless sigh. He vaulted out of the car and raced back, finding Randall lying face down in the snow, struggling through ragged, shallow breaths. Blizzard hovered over him, frantically licking the back of his neck, whining with urgent concern. Landon dropped to his knees beside the old man. "Mr. Cooper Randall, are you all right?" Randall rolled onto his back, his face pale and ghostly, his body slick with grime from chest to feet. The bottom of his right pant leg, where the stump remained, was soaked in blood, the icy ground having torn his skin. Landon's gaze froze on the crimson stain. A wave of nausea surged up. This was on him, his recklessness, his impatience, his blind pride. "I'm so sorry," Landon whispered, his voice cracking under the weight. "I'm truly sorry."